Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is so great to have you here with us. We are broadcasting, as always, from the heart of Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and this is a Jack Diggs production. Today feels, well, it feels weighty, in a good way. We're continuing our journey through a very specific, and I have to say, a very fascinating series.
It is good to be here. And yes, weighty is exactly the right word. I mean, we are deep in the middle of this month-long exploration of Black excellence. But the thing is, we're looking at it through the very specific lens of Rutherford County.
Right. And, yesterday we took a bit of a, I guess you could call it a detour. We paused the local focus for a moment to talk about the Reverend Jesse Jackson, a huge, huge national figure.
An icon.
A civil rights icon, for sure. We looked at the macro level, voting rights, economic justice, the big picture stuff that really changed the whole country. And frankly, that felt like the comfortable history, the textbook history we're all sort of used to.
Well, it was necessary context.
Yeah.
It really was. You can't understand the local movements without first understanding the national atmosphere they're happening in. It's like trying to understand the weather in your town without knowing what season it is.
That's a great way to put it.
But today we're doing something different, I'd say harder. We are zooming all the way in. We're moving from that wide-angle lens to the microscope.
Okay, I want to push on that microscope idea for a second. Because, usually when we talk about history, or even when we consume media about history, we gravitate toward the celebrities, the big names.
The Kings, the X's, the Jacksons.
Exactly. So why focus on a single county in Tennessee? Does the listener in, I don't know, Seattle or London really need to care about what happened in Rutherford County?
That is a completely fair question. And here's my argument. Rutherford County is a microcosm. It's a petri dish, really. If you want to understand how policy, like actual policy, hits people on the street, you can't look at the White House. You have to look at the county courthouse. You have to look at the local cemetery. The usual suspects of history, as important as they are, and they are immensely important, they often overshadow the incredible stories happening right in our own backyards. The dynamics we're going to discuss today. Reconstruction, the glass ceiling in the legal profession, the erasure of historical memory. None of those are unique to Tennessee. They are universal.
So by looking at Murfreesboro, we're actually looking at a slice of America.
Precisely. We are looking at the machinery of how a community is built, how it's broken, and, how it's rebuilt over time.
Okay, I'm sold. So what is the mission for today's deep dive? What are we trying to accomplish?
The mission is to analyze a production from Jack Diggs titled Legacy and Leadership. And within that, we're going to unpack the lives of 3 specific individuals. Each one represents a different, let's call it an archetype of civic engagement. We have the trailblazer in law, we have the preserver of history, and we have the pioneer in politics.
Law, history, and politics.
The 3 pillars, the absolute 3 pillars of a functioning community. I mean, if you don't have laws that are just, you have chaos. If you don't have political representation, you have tyranny. And if you don't have history, well, you have amnesia. You don't know who you are. You have no foundation.
We're going to be talking about Keita J. Barnes, Mary Watkins, and a man from the 19th century named Sampson W. Keeble. And I have to tell you, going through this source material, I mean, I live here. I walk these streets every day. I thought I knew the local lore.
Right.
But I didn't know half of this stuff. It's actually really exciting to move away from the textbook stuff and find these local legends who really shape things.
It creates a sense of place. It grounds you. And for our listener, whether you are in Rutherford County or listening from halfway across the world, I think there is a real lesson here about looking at your own community. Every town has a Keeble. Every city has a Watkins. You just have to look for them.
All right, let's jump right into it. Let's start with the modern era. Let's start with the Trailblazer. We're talking about Keita J. Barnes.
Keita J. Barnes, yes. This is a fascinating profile because she really, truly defines what we mean when we say modern excellence. But I think it's more than that. She defines resilience in a system that, let's be honest, wasn't built for her.
She does. And when you look at her resume, it just reads like a checklist of how to succeed in law. But the thing that jumps out at me immediately is the milestone. 2006.
That's the one. The year she was elected General Sessions Judge for the town of Smyrna.
Right. And here is the kicker. The detail that made me actually do a double take. She was the first Black elected official in Smyrna's entire history.
Let's just pause on that date for a second. 2006.
It's jarring, isn't it? I mean, 2006 is not ancient history. We're not talking about the 1950s or something.
Yeah.
By 2006, the Civil Rights Act was over 40 years old.
42 years old.
We were only 2 years away from electing Barack Obama as president of the United States.
Yeah.
And yet, in a major town in Tennessee, The color barrier for elected officials had never been broken.
It speaks volumes. It speaks volumes about the stickiness of local politics. National politics, it moves in these big waves. But local politics, it moves like a glacier. It's slow.
It's a good analogy.
So for Smyrna to elect its first Black official only then, it just shows you how deeply entrenched certain political demographics and power structures can be. But, it also tells you something really important about Keta Barnes herself.
What's that?
It tells you she couldn't just be good. To break a barrier that late in the game in this part of the country, you have to be undeniable. You have to be so overqualified, so competent that the traditional resistance just crumbles under the weight of your resume.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You don't get that role by just being good enough when you're the first. You have to be exemplary.
And she clearly was.
Right.
Sources say she served on that bench for 8 years.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you about the job itself. General Sessions Judge. To a layperson, that sounds, well, kind of general. Is this just traffic court? Small claims? How hard is this job, really?
Oh, it is incredibly hard, and I'm really glad you asked that because General Sessions is a bit of a misnomer. In the legal world, General Sessions is the emergency room of the justice system.
The ER.
Absolutely. 100%. It is high volume. It is high stress. You are dealing with everything that walks through the door. You have the traffic citation, sure. But in the same hour, you also have preliminary hearings for the most serious felonies: murder, rape, robbery.
Wow.
You have domestic violence cases where emotions are running incredibly high and someone's immediate safety is at risk. You have landlord-tenant disputes where a family is about to lose their home.
So it's not sitting in a quiet chamber reading legal briefs for 3 weeks?
Not at all.
Yep.
No. It is a grind. You have to make split-second decisions on the law hundreds of times a day while managing a crowded, often chaotic courtroom. If you don't know your stuff, if you don't know the rules of evidence cold, the entire system backs up.
Okay, that puts it in perspective.
So when the source material mentions that she was also designated to sit on the Rutherford County General Sessions Court,
That's a big deal.
that is a massive sign of professional respect.
It is.
It means her peers, the other judges, the lawyers, the entire legal community, they looked at the work she was doing in Smyrna and said, we need that mind. We need that skill at the county level, too. They don't hand those designations out as party favors. That is a hard-earned testament to her efficiency and her judicial temperament.
So how does someone get to that point? I'm going to rewind the tape a little bit, back to her education, because this is one of those details in the source material that just made me smile. She went to Mercer University for her undergrad.
A great school down in Macon, Georgia.
But she didn't major in political science. She didn't major in pre-law or criminal justice, the usual tracks. She has a Bachelor of Arts in English.
Yes, the English major. Love to see it.
As someone who loves a good book, I just love the idea that a reader became a judge. But let me play devil's advocate here. Does that actually track? Isn't law mostly about logic and statutes and cold, hard facts? Isn't it more like math than poetry?
That is such a common misconception. We're taught to treat law like it's an algorithm. If A plus B equals C, then guilty. But the law is really about language. At its core, it is entirely about words.
Unpack that for me. How so?
Okay, think about what a judge does all day. They practice something called statutory interpretation. They have to look at a text, a law, written by the legislature, and decide what those specific words mean in a specific, messy, real-world situation.
Right.
So if a law says no vehicles in the park, does that include a child's scooter? Does it include a drone? That is a linguistic question, not a mathematical one.
It's semantics.
It is high-stakes semantics. And if you're an English major, you spend 4 years training your brain to deconstruct narratives. You look at a text, you analyze the author's intent, you look at the historical context, you parse the specific meaning of one word in one particular sentence. That is exactly what a good judge does.
That makes a lot of sense. And frankly, aren't trials just stories?
Exactly. A trial is nothing more than two competing narratives being told to a judge or a jury. The plaintiff stands up and says, here is my story. The defendant stands up and says, no, here is my story. An English major is trained to spot inconsistencies in a story, to understand character motivation, to evaluate the reliability of a narrator. It's all critical thinking.
I'm convinced.
So when I see that she has that background before she went to the University of Tennessee College of Law in 2002, I see a judge who probably writes very clear, very thoughtful, very well-reasoned opinions. She isn't just applying a formula. She is reading the text of the law and the text of human behavior.
And entering the profession in 2002. Again, that time frame is so important.
Right. We need to be realistic about what that meant. Entering the legal profession in Tennessee in 2002 as a Black woman, the demographics were what they were.
She would have been in a very small minority.
A significant minority. Black women were still vastly underrepresented in the Tennessee bar, especially in the upper echelons. There just weren't a lot of mentors who looked like her in the high-level boardrooms or in the partners' meetings. She had to carve that path out for herself.
And carve it she did. I want to take a tour of duty, so to speak, through her career, because the range here is just wild. Usually, you see lawyers pick a lane early on. I'm a corporate lawyer, I do mergers. Or, I'm a prosecutor, I put bad guys away.
She didn't pick a lane. She drove on the whole highway.
Seriously. She starts in private practice. And we're not talking just hanging a shingle. She's at the big Nashville firms. Bay Pease, Berry and Sims, Waller Lanston, Dorch and Davis.
Those are the heavy hitters. That is big law. That means high pressure, huge corporate clients billing your life in 6-minute increments. That is where you really cut your teeth on complex litigation.
Then she moves to the bench. She becomes the judge, which is a totally different mindset, right? You go from being an advocate fighting for one side to being the impartial arbiter.
A complete 180 in perspective. And then from there, she moves to the state level. She served as an assistant attorney general for the state of Tennessee.
So now she represents the sovereign. She represents the people of the state in major cases.
And currently, now she's at the federal level. The source says she's an attorney for the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs in the North Atlantic District. And she's dealing with things like government ethics and labor law.
So let's just recap that trajectory. Private, high-stakes litigation, the judicial bench, state advocacy, and now federal ethics and administration.
It's a grand slam of legal service. It is just so rare to find someone who understands the justice system from every single one of those angles. She knows what it's like to represent a huge company being sued. She knows what it's like to be the one deciding the case. She knows what it's like to argue on behalf of the government. That gives her a holistic understanding of the law that you just don't get if you stay in one silo your whole career.
It's incredibly impressive. And it's no wonder she received the J.C. Napier Trailblazer Award in 2012. That kind of validation seems well earned.
Absolutely. The Napier Award is a very big deal in legal and civic circles in Tennessee. It recognizes public service impact. And I think service is the key word for Keita Barnes. Whether she was billing hours at a high-powered firm or sitting on the bench in Smyrna, there is this through line of integrity and excellence. She really defines what the source material calls the modern trailblazer.
But here is the question that always nags at me when we talk about trailblazers. We have these amazing people who break the glass ceilings, who do the work, who make the history, but time moves on. People retire, memories fade. Who remembers the trailblazers after they are gone?
That is the crucial question, isn't it? History doesn't just survive on its own. It's not a self-perpetuating machine. Entropy applies to memory just like it applies to physics. Things fall apart. If you don't actively work to preserve a story, it disappears.
Which brings us to our second subject. We are moving from the leadership of Judge Barnes to the memory of Mary Watkins.
The guardian of memory.
Mary Watkins. She is the president of the African American Heritage Society of Rutherford County. But, looking at the source material, she is so much more than just a title. She is a historian, a genealogist, a researcher, and honestly, she sounds like a detective.
She is the person doing the digging. I mean, you and I, we get to enjoy these stories today because someone like Mary Watkins spent decades in a dusty archive or walking through overgrown grass in a forgotten cemetery to find them.
Let's talk about her projects because she has a very tactile approach to history. One thing that really stood out to me was the Hidden Figures of Rutherford County calendar series.
Oh, I love this project. It's so smart.
It's a calendar. That's so simple, right? Like a school fundraiser. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized this is sneaky genius.
It is brilliant public history. Think about the utility of a calendar. A history book, it sits on a shelf. You might open it once a year. A documentary, you watch it once. But a calendar, it hangs on your kitchen wall.
Right. You see it every day.
You look at it every single morning when you drink your coffee. You look at it when you check the date for a dentist appointment. You are literally staring these figures in the face for 30 days at a time. It forces that history into your daily consciousness in a way a book just can't.
And who is on these calendars? It's not just the famous politicians or the well-known names.
No, and that's the hidden part. It's the educators, the business owners, the civic leaders, and the midwives.
Midwives. I love that detail. Why is it so important to focus on someone like a midwife?
Well, context is everything here. For a huge chunk of American history, especially in the South, Hospitals were segregated, or they were simply inaccessible to Black families because of poverty or geography. The midwives were the healthcare system.
They were everything.
They brought the community into the world. They were trusted figures, healers, pillars of the community. But you rarely see a statue of a midwife in the town square. Watkins is finding these names, people who were absolutely essential to the survival of the community, but weren't written about in the newspapers, and she's putting them back on the record.
But why are they missing in the first place? I mean, why do we even need a Hidden Figures project? Weren't these people known at the time?
Well, this gets into the really difficult topic of the systemic erasure of minority contributions. For a long, long time, the official record, the county histories that were written in the 1920s or 50s, they didn't consider Black contributions worth recording.
Or they actively ignored them.
Or worse, they actively excluded them to maintain a certain narrative of white supremacy. So these names aren't missing because the people didn't exist or didn't matter. They are missing because they were ignored. Mary Watkins is doing the active work of restoration. She is looking back through time and saying, I see you.
She's also doing that work physically, on the ground. We have to talk about the markers and monuments, specifically her work with the Evergreen Cemetery.
This is heavy work, emotionally heavy. She partnered with the Oakland's Mansion to memorialize enslaved individuals who were buried there.
So we're talking about moving from unmarked graves to recognized history.
Think about the emotional weight of that. An unmarked grave is a final indignity. It's a statement that says, you are property, not a person. Your life didn't matter enough to even mark the spot where your body rests.
It's dehumanizing.
Completely. So by placing a marker, by doing the painstaking research to say, here lies a human being, here is their story, here is their contribution, you are restoring their humanity retroactively. You are giving them the dignity in death that they were so often denied in life. It is almost a spiritual act.
It's incredibly powerful stuff.
Yeah.
And she isn't just hoarding this knowledge for herself. She isn't just the keeper of the keys. She's teaching other people how to do it. The source says she teaches genealogy at the Patterson Community Center.
And this is what I call genealogy as activism.
I like that phrase, genealogy as activism. But help me understand that. For a lot of people, probably a lot of our listeners, genealogy is a hobby. It's spitting in a tube to see if you're 5% Viking. It's fun. It's interesting. Why is it activism?
Because for Black families in the South, genealogy is a form of resistance. It is a struggle against the silence of the archives.
Because of the state of the records, right.
Exactly. We have what historians call the 1870 brick wall.
The 1870 brick wall. This is a technical term, but it's so crucial to understanding this. Explain that for the listeners who might not have heard of it.
Okay. The 1870 census was the first federal census taken after the Civil War and after the Emancipation Proclamation. It was a landmark because it was the first time that formerly enslaved people were listed by their first and last names. They were citizens. They were counted as people.
Okay, that makes sense.
But before 1870, in the 1860 or 1850 census, enslaved people were not listed by name. They were listed in these separate documents called slave schedules. And these were essentially property lists for the slaveholders. It would just be a tick mark. One male, age 30, one female, age 9. No names, no family relationships. Nothing.
Wow.
Yeah.
So if you were an African American trying to trace your family back and you get to 1870.
You hit a wall, a brick wall. You have a name in 1870, say your ancestor is John. But who was John in 1860? He was just a tick mark on someone else's property list. To bridge that 10-year gap, you have to do incredible detective work.
What kind of work?
You have to look at property deeds, at wills, at bills of sale, at plantation inventories. You have to look for your ancestor listed in the same documents as livestock and tools.
That has to be incredibly painful research to do.
It is traumatic, and it is technically very, very difficult. So when Mary Watkins teaches a class at Patterson Community Center, she isn't just showing people how to use a website. She's teaching them how to break through that wall. She is handing them the tools to reclaim their own identity. She is helping them prove that their families were here, that they survived, and that they built this county.
She ensures the history isn't erased. She is the memory keeper.
Without her, and people like her all over the country, the stories of Keta Barnes and the stories of our next subject would eventually just fade away. She creates the bridge between the past and the present.
Speaking of bridges, let's cross that bridge back in time. We have talked about the present with Judge Barnes. We've talked about the preservation of that history with Mary Watkins. Now, we need to talk about the foundation. We are traveling back to the 19th century to honor the pioneer they are discussing in this series.
Samson W. Keeble.
This story, this is movie material. It really is. Samson W. Keeble, born enslaved, and he becomes Tennessee's first black legislator.
It is an absolutely incredible arc, a life that spans from being legally defined as property to literally writing the laws of the state.
Let's start at the beginning. He was born on May 18th, 1833, right here in Rutherford County.
So he's born into a system that was designed from top to bottom to keep him in chains forever. That was the intent.
But there's this twist in his origin story, a huge one.
Yeah.
The source material mentions the anomaly of the will.
Yes, the Keble family's 1844 will, this is a key document.
This blew my mind. The will instructed the heirs of the estate to educate and eventually free the enslaved individuals.
We have to stop and acknowledge how incredibly rare and legally complex that was. In the antebellum South, in 1844, educating enslaved people was often illegal.
Right, because of the anti-literacy laws.
Exactly. After Nat Turner's rebellion in the 1830s, many Southern states clamped down hard. They made it a crime to teach a slave to read or write because they knew that literacy was a path to liberation. If you can read the Bible, if you can read the Declaration of Independence, you become dangerous to the system.
And what about freeing them?
Well, manumission, the legal act of freeing a slave, was becoming harder and harder to do. The southern states wanted to lock down the institution of slavery, so they put up all these legal barriers.
So for a will to explicitly say, educate them and free them.
It was a massive deviation from the norm. It was risky for the family that wrote it, and it was absolutely life-changing for Samson Keble. It set him on a completely different trajectory than millions of other enslaved people. It gave him a glimpse of a future that was supposed to be impossible.
And that education, that opportunity, led directly to his work. From 1851 to 1863, Keble works for the newspapers here in Murfreesboro. The sources say he was a roller boy and a press operator.
Can you just picture that scene?
I can. I'm imagining the smell of the ink, the noise of the press, the heavy machinery. But describe the job of a roller boy. It sounds like he was delivering papers on a bike, but that's not it at all.
No. He was inside the machine, so to speak. Being a roller boy meant applying the ink to the type. You had a hand roller, and you had to keep the lead type plates perfectly inked so the press could stamp a clean image onto the paper. It was physical, it was dirty, it was industrial work. He would have been covered in ink at the end of every single day.
But think about where he was. He was in the newsroom. He was physically standing over the printing press.
He was literally manufacturing information.
Exactly. And information is power. In a world where information was scarce and controlled, he had access to the news of the day before the subscribers did. He saw how public opinion was shaped. He saw how politics worked from the inside. He wasn't just working a manual labor job. He was getting an apprenticeship in the machinery of democracy.
That is such a cool way to look at it. And think of the profound irony. Here is this young, enslaved man printing newspapers that likely contained editorials defending the institution of slavery.
Wow, yeah.
He is printing speeches by politicians who argue that he isn't even a full human being. And yet, while he prints their words, he is analyzing them. He is learning their arguments better than they know them themselves.
It gave him what the source calls political awareness. So by the time emancipation came, he wasn't starting from scratch. He already knew how the world worked.
He was ready. He was more than ready.
So emancipation happens, the Civil War ends, the world is turned upside down. Keble moves to Nashville. And in 1866, he opens a business, the Rock City Barbershop.
The Rock City Barbershop. Now, we really need to talk about the cultural context of the black barbershop, because if you just think haircuts, you are missing 90% of the story.
It's not just a great clips.
Oh, it has never been that, especially in the Reconstruction era. The black barbershop was the sanctuary. It was what some historians call the black public sphere. You have to remember, black men couldn't gather in the lobby of the white-owned hotel to talk politics. They couldn't meet in the town square without facing harassment or violence. But the barbershop, that was their space.
It was the boredom of the community.
It was the boardroom, the country club, the social hall, and the political headquarters all rolled into one. And if you owned the barbershop, you were at the center of the entire network. You heard the gossip, you knew the business deals, you knew who was struggling and who was rising. You were the hub.
So Keble owns the hub. He owns the physical spot where everyone is meeting and organizing.
Which positions him perfectly for leadership. He is a business owner, he is literate, he is well-connected, and he has a physical space for political organizing.
Which leads directly to the ultimate ceiling-breaking moment, the 1872 election.
The 38th Tennessee General Assembly.
Samson Keble becomes the first African-American elected to the Tennessee legislature.
1872. Just think about that for a second. 7 years earlier, slavery was the law of the land in Tennessee. 7 years. A blink of an eye in historical terms. And now, a man born into slavery is walking into the state capitol, taking an oath of office, and sitting in a seat of power.
It must have been surreal for him and for the white legislators who had to sit next to him.
It was revolutionary. I mean, this was the peak of Reconstruction, that brief, shining, and ultimately tragic moment of multiracial democracy where the federal government was enforcing civil rights in the South before the backlash of Jim Crow really set in. And Samson Keeble was right there at the forefront, seizing that window of opportunity.
And he wasn't just a symbol. I think that is so important to stress. He wasn't just there to take a picture and sit quietly in the back. The source material outlines his legislative agenda from 1873 to 1875.
Right. He was doing the work. He introduced legislation to expand Black business rights in Nashville, which makes perfect sense, given his background as a barbershop owner. He understood that economic freedom was the key to political freedom.
But he also served on committees that sound, well, to be honest, they sound kind of boring.
Boring is good. Boring is where the work gets done.
The committees on immigration, new counties, public roads.
That is the stuff of governance. Public roads. That means he was worried about infrastructure. He was worried about commerce. How do farmers get their goods to market? By serving on those committees, he was proving his competency. He was showing that a Black man could govern just as well, if not better, than his white counterparts.
That's a great distinction.
He wasn't just a Black leader focused only on so-called race issues. He was a Tennessee legislator dealing with the nuts and bolts of running the state.
He normalized Black leadership by simply doing the job and doing it well.
Precisely. He was showing everyone that the sky wouldn't fall if a Black man helped decide where the new road went.
So after his time in the legislature, he didn't just disappear. His public service continued. He served as a magistrate from 1877 to 1882, then a court clerk until 1887.
A magistrate. A court clerk. Again, these are positions of public trust. You have to be seen as fair, as competent. He spent the rest of his life in public service.
He died in 1887 and is buried in Greenwood Cemetery, an entire life that spanned from slavery to the State House.
It is the definition of a pioneer, the one who clears the path.
So we have these three stories. We have Keeble in the 1800s, we have Barnes in the 2000s, and we have Watkins holding it all together. I want to try to connect these dots, because to me, this isn't three separate stories. This is one continuous timeline.
It is absolutely a continuum. You can visualize it as a relay race, a multi-generational relay race.
Okay, let's unpack that metaphor. Who starts the race?
Keeble starts it, no question. He builds the foundation. He proves that Black leadership is not only possible, but effective in Tennessee politics. He opens the door to the business world and the political world. He runs that first leg under the most incredibly difficult conditions imaginable.
And then what happens?
Well, then you have a long, difficult period in history. The baton is dropped, or rather, it's knocked out of the community's hands by the violence and legislation of the Jim Crow era. But the foundation Keeble laid remains. And eventually, Keita Barnes walks through the door that Keeble cracked open more than a century earlier.
She stands on that foundation.
Exactly. She takes that legacy of firsts and pushes it into the judiciary. Keeble was the lawmaker. Barnes became the judge who interprets the law. It's an evolution of power and influence within the system.
So where does Mary Watkins fit into this relay race?
Watkins is the one holding the map. She is the coach. She's the one on the sidelines, ensuring we don't forget where the race started or who ran the previous laps. Without Watkins, we might look at Judge Barnes and think she just appeared out of nowhere. We might think progress is automatic or easy.
Right.
Watkins shows us the lineage. She shows us the struggle. She creates what I'd call an intergenerational dialogue.
I love that term, intergenerational dialogue.
It means that Keita Barnes's career is possible because of people like Samson Keeble, and it is known and understood because of people like Mary Watkins. They are in conversation with each other across time, even if they never met.
It really highlights the importance of every single role. You need the person to break the barrier, you need the person to walk through the door and do the job, and you need the person to tell the story.
If any one of those three is missing, the community is weaker. If you have the leader but no historian, the leader is eventually forgotten. If you have the historian but no new leaders, there's no progress to record. It's a cycle.
That brings us to the so what for our listener. Because this is a Jack Diggs production, and the source material mentions a specific protocol for this series. They have a call to action.
The Everyday Heroes Initiative, yes.
Right. They are actively asking for nominations They want to know who is doing this kind of work right now in the neighborhoods, schools, and churches of Rutherford County.
And I think that is the real twist of this deep dive for you, the listener. We look at Keeble and Barnes and Watkins as these larger-than-life historical figures. But at one point, Keeble was just a guy punting newspapers. Barnes was just a law student reading a book. Watkins was just a lady who got curious about an old photo.
History is happening right now. It is
I-
happening in your neighborhood, on your street.
Exactly. So the question for you to think about is, who is the Samson Keeble of your block? Who is the Keita Barnes of your workplace? Who is the Mary Watkins of your family reunion?
Maybe it's the teacher who stays late every day to tutor kids who are falling behind. Maybe it's the small business owner who mentors the teenagers in the neighborhood. Maybe it's the grandmother who keeps the old family Bible with all the birth and death dates written in it.
Those are the people building the legacy right now. That grandmother's a historian, that teacher is a trailblazer, and the source material encourages you to nominate them, to message Jack Diggs on Facebook, to share their story.
Because if you don't share it, who will?
That's the entire lesson of Mary Watkins. If you don't record it, it might get lost forever. Silence is the enemy of history.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I keep going back to one image. I just can't shake it. It's the image of Samson Keeble as a roller boy.
It is a striking image, isn't it?
Just the profound irony of it. A young man who is legally considered property, pressing the ink onto the page, printing words that discuss laws he couldn't vote on, in a country that didn't even claim him as a full citizen. And yet, he absorbed it all. He used that very machinery of information to eventually write his own laws.
It is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. It truly is. But for me, I also reflect on the absolute necessity of the memory keepers. Civilization is fragile. Stories are fragile. Mary Watkins reminds us that maintaining civilization isn't just about building new roads, it's about remembering who walked on the old ones.
It's about remembering who walked on them. That's a beautiful way to put it.
We need the Mary Watkins of the world just as much as we need the judges and the legislators. They are equally important.
So here is our final thought for you to chew on as you go about your day. We talked about the importance of preservation, but let's flip it. If there were no Mary Watkins in your town, if there was no one doing that work of remembering, whose stories would vanish within a single generation?
And more importantly, what can you do to make sure those stories survive?
It doesn't take a history degree. Sometimes it just takes asking a question. Grandma, tell me about that old photo. Hey, who started this local business?
Curiosity is the first step of preservation.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into legacy and leadership. It has been a real pleasure unpacking these lives with you.
Always a pleasure. There is just so much to learn when you just look local.
Stay curious, keep digging, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.
Goodbye, everyone.
See ya.